The rapid rate in which my compulsive gambling behavior would escalate out of control is just so staggering for me to think about now. I'm going to try and cover some of it in this video. Guys, it's Matt. I am a compulsive gambler in recovery, and I'm your mind and movement mentor here to help you. So I recently made a video about when you stop gambling, how life is not the same. You enter that anhedonic headspace where you can't get pleasure from anything else. Normal things that you know and love, wholesome things, dog walking, cooking, being out with friends, is just fails into obscurity by comparison of what it's like to gamble, because you're just so corrupted in the fog, in the madness at that time. But this video is going to be a little bit different. This is going to be about the way in which I would try to hold on for dear life, to not stop, to get to that stage. So I would know from experience that even though I wasn't having a great time gambling, I didn't want it to stop, because I knew that there would almost be that reset phase that I would have to go through. And I would do everything I could to keep the gambling going. And often a lot of what would excite me about winning was not that I had more money in the kitty so I could go and do this lavish thing, that thing, less financial pressures, less stress. It would be just so that I could continue gambling, because I didn't want that point to come, that stop of, I suppose, just the addiction just fueling and running itself at that point. And my gambling would always start off really controlled to an extent. If I would re-enter gambling, so essentially relapsing after a period of not gambling for a while, I would start off relatively controlled and almost systematic for a short period of time. And then there would be about a week where I would just start to lose control. And I'd feel like it's the classic nature of addiction. I would need the period of time between the bet and the next bet, or gambling activity and gambling activity, to become shorter. I didn't have the patience to see it out. If when I first relapsed, I put a bet on Saturday and it won, I might actually be able to make it to Tuesday or Wednesday before gambling again, because I could kind of take stock of the fact that I'd won, and I could almost have a bit more space in between my thoughts. But once that starts to accelerate, almost like a flywheel that just kind of gets its own momentum out of control, it would be the next hour that was absolute torture without being able to gamble. And it would only just get faster. And I would often just place bets on things that I had absolutely no knowledge of. No knowledge whatsoever. Japanese football that you can't even access. I don't think you can't even watch or listen to on the radio or anything. Just sat there on the Paddy Power website, which I couldn't actually log on to because I banned myself completely online. But just sat there refreshing it, waiting for the little suspended padlocks to come up, to think that there had been something happening, a red card, a penalty, a goal, and the odds, looking to see if the odds were about to change. And I'd be able to concentrate on absolutely nothing else. And it would just get so overwhelming that I think, how on earth did I get here? I can't even pronounce the names of these teams. I couldn't tell you one player that is on the field. I'm supposed to be doing something else, but instead I've got my laptop adjacent to me on a gambling website that I can't enter because I've completely blocked through GamStop everything. Well, I'd blocked, I could enter the websites, but I couldn't actually, I'd self-excluded with everywhere. So I could go on there to see the odds kind of just, and I'd placed the bet in one of the bookmaker shops that I'd have to potentially travel multiple miles to drive outside of my self-exclusion radius. So much time and effort just kind of gone into the thinking of just wanting to keep this gambling going, not being prepared to accept the fact that life was going to get incredibly boring, incredibly mundane, and almost like the stimulus was just going to fall off a cliff. And I would simultaneously want to keep the kitty alive, but I'd also get kind of more reckless, and I'd also kind of do almost more Hail Mary like bets. I remember last year betting on an Australian football match. I think it was over 10.5 corners for multiple hundreds of pounds, and then it essentially exceeding what I could bet in the betting shop. So then having to bet on over 4.5 first half or over 5.5 first half corners, and one team to have over, so because this was the game I was fixated on, this was going to be my bet, and I wasn't able to put my stake on, of which was all of my money at this time. And it just so odd how, I'm really kind of having a strange moment as I recall it, as to how on earth did I get there? I'd go from leading up to a relapse, which was betting on something that was the most thought out bet known to man, because I'd often started to think about gambling. This is something that I have to be very, very wary of now. I'd almost have to start to think about gambling often weeks before I actually relapsed. And it would be like this progressive chipping away at me that would slowly seduce me back to it. I've never been one of these people that would have gone from zero thought about it to just spontaneously did it the next day. For me, it would be like, I can feel the urge coming and I'm not going to do it. And I'd often I've spoke before about the hypothetical bets that I would put on once I'd stopped gambling that would just drive me ballistic, because often they would win, and it would almost kind of reinforce that I'd made the wrong decision to stop. Almost like the addiction saying, see, you were due a win. Even a stop clock's right twice a day. Sorry, mate, you stopped too early. And that would just frustrate the hell out of me, because I think that, like, not only do I feel like crap at the moment, I could still be gambling, which would make me feel less crap. And also, as luck would fucking have it, pardon my French, I would be winning. So what on earth is going on here? But prior to the relapse, I would often start to hypothetically bet, like, if I was going to bet this week, I'd bet on this or I'd bet on that. And at that point, and say this is something that I have to be so mindful of, I couldn't win. And here's why. Because one of two things would happen. Either I would win my hypothetical bet, and then my brain would say to me, you're good at this. Why don't you make a comeback? Come on. You're calling things every week like Mystic Matt, come back and gamble. Or it wouldn't win, and then I'd wait for the next week, it wouldn't win again, possibly one more occasion after it wouldn't win. And I've said this before on several videos, I'm such a sucker for the gambler's fallacy that often my thinking was, well, there's been 5 games in a row with 5 Manchester United games in a row with less than 3 goals. There's definitely going to be more than 3 goals this week. And I would kind of almost go against the form and do the law of averages type thinking, which of course is incredibly flawed. It's called the gambler's fallacy for a reason. But that's the way it would work in my very kind of distorted mind at the time. So I suppose this video is kind of a little bit of a sequel / prequel to the video I recently made, which explains about what to do if you or when you stop gambling, how you're going to feel, and some proactive positive steps that you could take. That one's well worth a watch. But this one, I suppose, is just kind of summarising the mind of a compulsive gambler of how I would think about not wanting to stop, and how I would desperately, from periods gone by, know what I was getting myself in for, know that I was going to experience that real kind of lull. So therefore I would just get progressively more reckless with my gambling. And it was almost a bit like I suppose, coming to almost like a crescendo of just nihilism. Screw it. At some point this week, it's all going to dry up anyway. I can feel I'm coming to the end of my financial capabilities. I'm on a horrible run. I need to stop at some point, but I'm not prepared for that to be yet. So let's just bet again today, bet again. And at no point then, and this is the addiction and this is the power of it, at no point then could I stop and say, yes, okay, but I'll do that in 5 or 6 days' time. It had to be minutes after I was thinking it. Often on the wrong things, sports that I had no interest in, that I knew nothing about, just to be gambling and just to still be in that stimulus of the brain kind of on fire, like say watching the odds on a laptop of an event that wasn't being televised, I couldn't listen to. I just to see if the betting was going to go suspended, or like I say on Paddy Power, the padlocks, or on Bet365 app, the odds disappearing for a second, and then, oh, they've changed. That means there's definitely been a goal that stood. You know, it's not VAR. Just crazy, just really, really crazy. The invisible addiction in many ways, and horrible, really, really challenging to be a compulsive gambler. It really, really is. I've made another video saying why I think it's certainly on par with, if not the worst addiction, or certainly one of that you can have. And that's not to diminish other addictions, which are all incredibly inherently bad in their own ways as well. But a bit more of a snapshot today into the mind of a compulsive gambler. But this time next week, next Friday, it's 1 week today from the shooting of this video, I will be 9 months without gambling. So onwards and upwards, I make these videos as a form of therapy for myself, I suppose, in many ways, but to educate other people on gambling related harm, raising awareness of a addiction that is only getting worse, incredibly alarming trajectory when you look at where it is going with statistics and the way we are pummeled with gambling marketing everywhere we look. If you're interested in these kind of topics, I really appreciate you watching the videos. Share them please with someone who may be struggling. I respond to all the comments. I love hearing from you guys, and it's just really, really great to be trying to raise awareness on a very sensitive, dangerous and delicate topic. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video very, very soon.